we mentioned the Alabama game that gets all the focus. It could be a 1-versus-2 matchup in Atlanta. Looking at the schedule, Joe, where do you see the possible pitfalls? We've got Alabama to open up at the Georgia Dome. NC State gave Florida State all they could handle. Francois had to lead them down the field in the last 3 minutes to win it 24-20. The typical date with Miami, they got behind in that game. Some would say they were almost lucky to beat the Canes last year. Miami's been really close the last couple of years. The one non-division game, so everybody in the ACC plays everyone in their division. You play 2 games in the other division, so it's Miami. It's Duke this year, so they don't have to deal with another contending team like you would expect, like they did with North Carolina last year. Louisville, of course, Clemson on the road, November 11th. And, of course, the Florida Gators to finish.
It's not an easy schedule. And even though they have DeAndre Francois coming back, obviously week number 1 will really make or break this team from a confidence perspective. Should Florida State lose that game, depending on the type of loss that they have, that could really dictate where this team goes. I mean, let's not forget Louisville and Lamar Jackson. From a defensive standpoint, Mark, he really exposed that defensive front 7 in Louisville last year. I mean, they could not contain him. And even though the game is in Tallahassee this year, he could really create a lot of problems for that Seminoles defensive front 7. So that's a game that's on my radar that you have to mark, especially even though they got blown out and people think of the revenge factor. They really did not look good in that ball game. Clemson as well. Even though Clemson, from an offensive perspective, they lose Jordan Leggett, they lose Wayne Gallman, they lose, obviously, Deshaun Watson. They have talent offensively. Deion Kane, Hunter Renfro, Ray McLeod. And defensively, they have Ferrell, they have Dexter Lawrence. Not going to be an easy game at all, especially when you look at how Clemson's played Florida State. They're going to be a confident team heading into that matchup. And you can't take away from Miami. Even though I think Miami is a step back this year, I think Miami's in the 8-4 range because of the loss of Brad Kaya. It's a rivalry game. So that anything can happen there, along with the Florida Gators. So I think there's honestly about 5 ball games that you have to mark if you're a Seminole fan. I mean, even though you have some of the games in Tallahassee, by no means is it an easy ball game against Louisville or even against NC State for that matter.
So credit Florida State, I will at least, for scheduling Alabama because they've got the non-conference date against Florida, in-state rival. They always play that. And if you look across the country, aside from the Baylors and Kansases of the world, just about everybody plays one big opponent. And they already have them on the schedule, and then they go out and play Alabama. And they're Florida State. They could go through the ACC with 1 loss, 0 losses, of course, but even 1 loss, they win the ACC, they're getting to the college football playoff. They don't have to schedule like that. And they went out and gave us something to look forward to on September 2nd.
Yeah, should Florida State knock off Alabama? And again, I don't think, I mean, you look at both of these games, this is Alabama's toughest opening week number 1 game that I can remember in a long time. I know they played Denard Robinson in Michigan. They played C.J. Spiller in Clemson. They played Virginia Tech a couple of times with Ryan Williams when he was there. But this is West Virginia. I mean, this is the hardest opening season game Nick Saban and the crew have had to play in recent years. I mean, this is a top 10 battle. So again, whichever team can win this ball game and the way they win it, if it's a close game, obviously both teams won't take a step back in a big way. But if one team does get blown out, again, it could dictate where that team is at the end of the year.
Yeah, just about in all of those cases, those teams turned out to be very flawed teams. The Michigan team went 8-5 that year. The Virginia Tech teams were not great. You mentioned the West Virginia game against Clint Trickett and company, where he actually put a scare into Blake Sims and company in 2014. Last year, USC wasn't right yet. Actually, the team that probably gave them the toughest non-conference game to open up was Wisconsin a couple years ago. It wasn't close, but it was competitive into the early 4th quarter. But this is going to be serious. This is going to be a serious, you're talking serious 5-star, top 5 talent in Florida State, and it should be a fun one to watch.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think the thing that comes to mind is both teams will respect each other. There will be no love lost, but at the same time, Florida State will respect Alabama, and I think the Crimson Tide will come into this ball game not thinking that you could just walk out onto the field and intimidate the Seminoles. So that's the one thing that you want to look at in this matchup. Both teams will respect each other, and that makes for a great matchup.
All right, it's our way too early preseason look at Florida State football, getting you set for the first week of August when the Noles head camp and try to figure things out at the backup quarterback position, offensive line, those two spots in particular. With Joe Lisi from Go for the Two. Joe, once again, where can we find your book?
Yeah, you could find it on Amazon, Mark. It's Go for the Two, Power 5 college football preview. They can order it online at Amazon.com. They could also go to my website, goforthe2.com. That's a number 2. They can pick it up there.
All right, Joe, it's always fun.
Love the show, Mark. Anytime.